Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. Specifically, I'm talking about the new moon in Aquarius on the 1st of February. But as always, I'm going to look at it in the setting, which means all the other planets, where they are, what alignments they're making, because this makes all the difference between one new moon in Aquarius and another. And of course, all of us have Aquarius in our charts, even if we're not an Aquarian, or we don't have Aquarius rising, or we don't have moon in Aquarius. We do have Aquarius in our charts. So when the new moon is taking place in that part of our horoscope, remember the sun is already moving through that area. Now we have the moon joining the sun. That is a new moon. It kind of puts a real beacon in that area. And as with all new moons, we're talking about new chapters. And I'm very keen on consciously looking at the things we know about, like, for instance, this new moon in Aquarius, consciously being aware that it's a new chapter. And if we start things or we think about changing the way things are at the time of a new moon, it sort of sets it not exactly in stone, but it gives us a marker, something to focus on. And we're probably going to be a lot more successful with the new chapters we open when we've given that kind of conscious connection to what's going on in the cosmos, so to speak. Now, this new moon marks the beginning of the new Chinese year. And this year, it's the year of the tiger, the water tiger. Now, I don't know very much about Chinese astrology. I'm sure real Chinese astrology is incredibly complex. But just the idea that everybody born in a single year has the characteristics of that animal or whatever it is that designates that Chinese year, that's a very generalized kind of thing, a little bit like having Jupiter in Pisces. I mean, for a year-ish, Jupiter's going to be in Pisces, so it's not really a personal thing so much unless it's making some kind of connection with your natal chart. But what's quite interesting about this year of the tiger, which I've actually talked about a tiny little bit in my overview for the year ahead, is that it signifies a year of major and dramatic change for the planet. And I would absolutely agree with that, looking at things from an astrological perspective, a Western astrological perspective. The other thing about the tiger, which I think is a nice thing to think about, is that it's a very proud and strong animal and cares for its family. And we can sort of adapt that and think of that as a characteristic for the year, maybe a year where the family is super important to all of us. And we are encouraged to be brave and protective, whether it's to our own, small brood, or whether it's in a bigger sense, maybe even the sense of being protective to the planet. So I'm going to waste no more time at this point. We'll go straight and have a look at what this new moon looks like in the context of everything else that's happening at the time. So here, as you can see, at least I hope you can see, my big kind of vertical line, which is the midheaven and the Imum Coeli, which is the MCIC axis, one of the most important angles in the horoscope. And to the right of that vertical line at the top, sort of 12 o'clock position, you'll see there's a kind of upside down omega sign. Very apt, I think. Now that is the south node, and at the very opposite point, which is in the kind of 6 o'clock position on this chart, we've got the north node. So I'm not going to be looking at those at all during, while we take a look at this pattern here, because the nodes are not planets, and therefore they can't be considered of significance in the sense of what I'm going to be looking at, which are the patternings that we're getting at the moment. Now, of course, the nodes are important. That's where eclipses take place. So they're very important, but they're not important to our story of the new moon in Aquarius at this particular time. So if you look and you leave out the nodal axis there, what you've got is all the planets in a tight little group. Now, in fact, Mars is the planet up at the 11 o'clock position. It's leading all the other planets around the horoscope. And Uranus, the television aerial, at the 7 o'clock position, is scooping them all up. So we take significance from this. We think of Mars and Uranus being rather dominant planets here. And I'll go into that in a minute. But what we're also looking at here is the fact that Mars and Uranus are in trine. They're 120 degrees apart. So what we've got here is a bundle shaping. Now, this is interesting for two reasons. It's interesting because babies who are born at this time are going to have this bundle shaping. And because the moon moves faster than anything else, the moon is going to separate out from this little bundle and become, a more important part of the puzzle, because it will become like the handle, the gear stick to everything that's in that little trine there. So what we say when we see a chart of a person with a lot of planets grouped together like this, a concentrated group of planets, is that they in tandem are very focused individuals. They tend to have one goal and then another. They kind of, they do things one after another, but they devote each thing with extreme attention. And they can be rather kind of, not obsessive, compulsive, but they do like things in the right place, and they do like things to be where they can control them. So that's the kind of shaping we've got in terms of what that means if you've got babies being born at this time. But what it means in terms of life as we know it, what's happening to us, is that in a similar kind of way, you've got a very concentrated energy of planets, so that our experience is very, very focused. It's dense, it's profound. There's nothing kind of lightweight going on. And I think we know what's going on at the moment enough to support the fact that these aren't very lightweight times that we're living in. And this particular pattern is going to be with us most of the year. So we can, well, it's another reason why I said in my year ahead that this is going to be a rather difficult year, because there's not a lot of flexibility and free movement. There's an awful lot of stickiness and getting stuck in particular patterns. But one of the things I want to look at, the new moon that is going to take place on the 1st of February, just before that time, Mars, and that is the planet in the 11 o'clock position in red, that is entering Capricorn on the 24th of January. So we've got a new sign for Capricorn. Now, what that also means is that as it moves forward, following Venus and Mercury, Venus, and Mars are all going to connect with Pluto over the course of the next 3 to 4 weeks. Now, that's a very intense experience, a very profound experience. And I think particularly if you're a Capricorn or a Cancer or an Aries or a Libra, and you have one of those around the 17th of the month's birthdays, then this is going to be a very transformational period for you, because we have Pluto so involved in the astrological narrative. That means you can do great things to change your own life and to change patterns and to bring a sense of, I'm changing at core level, so in tandem, my life will change. But we can also be looking at circumstances that simply just happen. And they force that same process. We have to make huge adjustments to the things that happen to us. So Mars will continue its journey through Capricorn over the next 6 weeks, as I've said. So the next really important date we come to is the 29th of January. Now, on the 29th of January, Mercury will conjoin Pluto and Venus will turn stationary direct. Venus has been in retrograde since late December. And of course, with a retrograde Venus, rather depends again whether she's important to you as a major planet in your chart. Is she your ruling planet? Does she rule your sun? Where is she positioned? Then lots of things related to Venus may have been on a bit of a go slow. or they may have become very complicated and protracted, and it's very difficult, especially with things to do with love affairs, things to do with money, things to do even with the arts, we could say. And considering everything with coronavirus in various countries of the world, there has been a lot of stop-starting with artistic productions. So we won't lay the blame at the feet of Venus, so to speak, but we can certainly see her as part of that narrative. Now, the Mercury-Pluto conjunction that happens on that day is the second time this has occurred. It occurred for the first time earlier in December. And in fact, it occurred on the 29th of December. And so it's returning to that same position, which means that some of the things that may have been relevant at that time, under discussion in the process of change, we now get a real concentration of all that back again. We get to review it. We get to see if it's workable, or what things are now standing in the way of the perfection of that endeavor, or whatever may be around at that time. But of course, Mercury will turn direct on February the 4th, and then it will go back over Pluto, as it will do on the 10th of February. So we've got quite an extended Mercury-Pluto period. And if we think about the quality of that, it's about digging deep to find answers. If we just want a simple statement that goes with it, that's it. We have to dig deep. But at the same time, things are uncovered on a Mercury-Pluto conjunction, which means we can have a revelation, or we may have out in the world all sorts of scandals breaking, or things happening that keep us glued to our seats because we can see how big they are. But of course, at the core of a Mercury-Pluto conjunction, what we're looking at is a change in thinking, a change in view. And with Pluto, that's at a very profound level. And of course, it is when we have those huge shifts in our outlook, in our view, in our consciousness, then that's when things start to change. So, of course, as I'm recording this to you, there is a lot of strife in the world and a lot of things going on that are very concerning. And as we look at these aspects coming together at the end of the month, we can see there is both the opportunity for resolution, because we're going back over old ground, and Venus, for instance, is turning direct, so we feel there is some movement. But I think if we're being honest and realistic, it's going to take quite a lot of time to work some of these global situations out. And it's the same with our own lives, that these things aren't probably going to end overnight. They're going to take a little time. So as we come to the 30th, we end January on a Sun-Uranus square. So my goodness, is that shocking? Is that surprising? Does that change the map in some way? Of course it does. And it especially does that if we happen to have a birthday around the 30th of January, or the 30th of April, or the 30th of July, or the 30th of October. That's because Uranus is focusing its change-bringing properties on that birthday group. Or if you've got a birthday around that date, it doesn't have to be on the 30th of the month. So now we come back to me now, because you're probably getting tired of looking at that circle. So I want to talk a little bit about the positioning of this new moon. If we take everything in the context of what I've been talking about, we've been talking about a profound change of view, a change of thinking, of things being revealed, of scandals, of situations that are really enormously affecting, in a way, and affect how we look at things. We can see that's all coming up towards the end of January. And now on the 1st of February, we have a new moon. So we have the sun conjunct the moon, and that in turn is conjunct the planet Saturn. The Sun-Saturn conjunction exact won't be there till the 4th, but we're certainly feeling it by then. And what we're also going to understand is that this new moon, which happens in the early morning, according to the chart I just showed you, which was a set for Istanbul. So it's going to be during the day. By the time we get to the end of the day, the moon will already have passed over Saturn. This is why we talk about a new moon conjunct Saturn. If we return to the idea of the new moon again, new chapters, new beginnings, the fact that this new moon is conjunct Saturn says this is a new beginning that comes out of hard times, of hard realizations, of difficult things. But of course, sometimes they're the best new starts of all, because we're being realistic, as we should be, on a new moon conjunct Saturn. We have to look at situations, warts and all. But also, if we have a practical mind and we bring our philosophical spirit to that practical mind, we can do solid things at this time that are conducive to our growth, our security, our stability and success. But it would be ridiculous, really, of me to say that this period around the new moon, at the start of the Chinese New Year, as we come to the end of January, head into early February, that this is a joyous period of 2022. It isn't. It's all about reality, taking a grip. And for all of us who, I'm sure all of you, like myself really, are sick and tired of having to replan things, unable to make plans or do things because of the circumstances we've been thrust in, it's yet more of that. And we have to have even more kind of resolve and determination to be able to, to go forward, which we will. We need to be both practical and philosophical. Now, what I also want to talk about this new moon, new moons begin things. So it begins a new moon cycle. So the new moon will take 6 months for it to become a full moon, if you like. So the moon in Aquarius, being a new moon, will become a full moon on the 12th of August. So there is a time period here of 6 months in which things can come together. So again, thinking about how consciously we approach a new moon, a full moon, certain things, and we do things that we are consciously aware of that might take 6 months to fulfill. We may decide, for instance, to, become a vegan and give it a 6-month period to see, how well we do. Or we might begin a new relationship or a new course, or there may be other things that have their beginnings at this time. And then in 6 months' time, we'll see where we are with them. But if we have that kind of idea of a 6-month stretch, it can be very kind of encouraging. It can keep us on track, so to speak. So those 2 dates are relevant. And of course, they're particularly relevant if you're an Aquarius or a Leo, because in August, the sun will be in Leo, the moon in Aquarius right now, the sun and moon are in Aquarius. And of course, I'm going to talk about how that new moon, where it fits in your chart for all the signs in a little minute. So coming back to this period of time, wherever you are, whatever you're doing in life, we've got the Saturn-Uranus dynamic, very, very strong, which means taking accountability. And through taking accountability, we find freedom. It doesn't necessarily follow straight away. We may realize something, or we may realize it's our responsibility or our fault or whatever we may choose to do. And we may feel that with our whole being, which is what we're meant to do. And the release from that may take a little while. It doesn't always follow the next day, although we may feel something at some level. And this is the process we're sort of seeing going on in the world. I mean, I wrote my Friday Bite, a week or so ago, and I talked about the Saturn-Uranus flavor to events. And I was particularly struck by Novak Djokovic, who had landed in Melbourne, all set to, retain or his title, tennis title, and he got rejected at customs and had to stay in a detention hotel. And the thing is that that's so Saturn-Uranus in a way, because it was about the rules of the country. These are the rules Australia have set You have to be vaccinated to enter the country. So if you are going to want to enter the country and you aren't vaccinated, then you're going to have some very ironclad paperwork to explain why and what. And that's really, again, the sense of what's going on every time, as we can see it now. Sun-Uranus square on January the 3rd, Sun-Saturn conjunction February the 4th, and a new moon sandwiched in between the two. This is all about respecting the rules, but also being aware that in order for things to grow and for us to find freedom of expression or whatever it is, things have to change too, but it's getting the balance between the two that's the difficult part. So let me now go through each sign so that you get some idea of where this new moon is focusing its spirit of new chapters. I think, interestingly enough, about Aquarius, I think a lot of people get confused about Aquarius, and they think it's a water sign because they see the symbol, the image of Aquarius as this man bearing an urn with water apparently falling out of it, but it's not water, it's ether. And ether is, if you like, the wisdom of the gods almost. So Aquarius is an air sign. So it has nothing to do with the ocean of watery feeling, which is a moon in a water sign. It's in an air sign. So we're in the area of concepts and the abstract world. And that's good for us. We need a bit of everything. So when the moon is, or the new moon is in Aquarius, it encourages us to have a look at how we conceive things. What are our mental concepts about things? It encourages us to look at the world differently, it encourages us to look at our lives in a different way, and to perhaps, move the envelope, not do things in our comfort zone, to go out of our comfort zone. And Aquarius, I often think, is the light bringer. I like to think maybe coming out of that urn is lots and lots of beautiful light, the light of information, the light of spirit, all those kind of things. So that in a way, when we see a new moon in Aquarius in our charts, we're thinking of what area does this now bring enlightenment to? And what dark place does this new moon bring light to? So that's the theme we're sort of working with. Oh, one last thing. I'm always thinking about one last thing, aren't I? But this is important because another reason why Aquarius is very misunderstood, because people do think it's a water sign, but the second thing is we tend to think of it being ruled by Uranus, which is its modern ruler, which is where we get these ideas of Aquarius being light years ahead, the light bringer, all these kind of technological aspects of things, this humanitarian sign, that's very Uranus. But its old ruler, Saturn, is still in there. So we still have this idea of construction and restriction and the need to perhaps retain one's standing in situations. And that applies equally well to the new age of Aquarius, which isn't just the age of enlightenment. It's also the age of Saturn is in there too. So that means we still must face restrictions and shortages and things in our lives that mean we have to adapt to them. So Aquarius is a very complex sign. It's both a Saturnian element to it and also a Uranian element to it. So here we go. We look at Aquarius. You've got this new moon in your sign, which means it's a new moon in your first house. And that means it's very personal. This is a me situation. So it's about your personal goals, your personal wishes and desires. It's how much you and your personality can impact situations through the force of your personality, through who you are. And of course, a new moon is also a new look, a new image. So this may be exactly the time to think about updating your image in some way. I think that's often easier for a woman, isn't it? We can get some new clothes or do our hair a different way. But I think it's a bit more than that. It means our image out to the world, Aquarius, how do we want that to, shine across? What do we want people to see us as? And of course, in these days, our image in terms of our social media presence and all those kind of things, that matters too. So we might think about updating all that kind of stuff. So it is a new beginning. And especially if it's your birthday, January the 30th, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th of February, then this idea of a new beginning is writ large across the whole year. And pioneering new starts, and the idea really of getting out of your comfort zone. I think that's one of the strongest things I want to think about. Now, when we come to Leo, then this new moon is in the 7th house. So we're in the area of relationships. So this new moon begins a new cycle for relationships. But remember, this new moon is up close and personal to both Saturn and Uranus. So for a lot of Leos, I'm not saying every single solitary Leo will find that they're at a make or break point with a relationship, whether that's a relationship with a company, a relationship with a colleague, a relationship with a lover, or the relationship with a spouse. Also, if you happen to have a birthday around the 30th of July, 1st, 2nd, 3rd of August, you're more likely to be facing this idea of a big new chapter coming about, and it involving the end of a relationship. Just in general, we're looking at that new moon in relation to the Saturn-Uranus dyad. And that means that patterns need to be changed, broken, grown through in order for you to grow. And it might be any area in life that you might say, you know what, I'm going to try this in a different way. I'm going to forget my old style, my old patterns, the way things used to be done. And I'm going to try something completely different. In a way, you too are getting out of your comfort zone, but it does have a kind of relation to a relationship. That's the other side of it. So if we come to Scorpio, this new moon is in your 4th house, the base of the horoscope, a very underestimated area of the horoscope. We talk about it in terms of home and family. And yes, how important are home and family? Of course, they're key. Where we've come from, our upbringing and the home we live in now, the family we create, the family we've come from, all of these things are super important. In fact, you might say, if we've had an upbringing that's solid and we've had a good family behind us, we tend to find it easier to make our way in the world out there. So there is a connection between the 4th house and where you come from and where you're going. But it is a little bit more than that because it's the foundations of the future. So this new moon can say a whole variety of things. It may suggest that you need to start putting in the foundations of some new endeavors. They may be home-related, family-related, or they may not be. They may be career, they may be something to do with an entirely different area of life. But the foundations should be put in now. So we're going to use that new moon, new beginning symbolism, and we're going to remember it's close to Saturn, which means making things solid and real. So consciously, at this new moon time, start the beginnings of a project. Now, of course, a new moon might also signify in this area a new member of the family, whether by birth or marriage. It might signal a new home or some changes on the home front. And it may have a lot to do with your family in that they too have things going on in their lives, which are an important part of you as well. Your participation is needed. And because Saturn is there, it may also say, don't expect things to be so easy here. There may be a difficulty or a sadness or a problem, but nothing you can't work through. So if we look at Taurus for you, then the new moon is in the 10th house. And this is really an out in the world part of the horoscope. Yes, it can be to do with your career, and it can also be to do with, social life, your participation out there in the world. And, some of you may actually have quite an upfront position. You may be at the head of a company or a head of a charity, or you may be doing something that puts you in the spotlight. And this new moon, if you like, says, embrace the spotlight. Go into it. Put your head above the parapet and be counted. On a mundane level, it might signify a new job or a new part of an existing job, or it might indicate a new location for a job, which doesn't necessarily mean the job itself changes, but where you work, how you get to work, and all those kind of things does indeed change. It's a very, very good time, Taurus, on this new moon, conjunct Saturn, to think about your platform. Your platform. How is it? Where is it? Could it do with some new things put towards it? Is it a bit same old, stale old? Because this new moon offers a new platform. Next, we come to Pisces. Now, Pisces, you know, Aquarius is your preceding sign, which means that the new moon is taking place in the 12th house. And we often think of this house as a kind of, well, I call it a house of shadows often, because it is a rather low-key area of the horoscope. We don't see everything in full technicolor. It's the area of the unconscious mind. But it's terribly powerful because, as I often say, and I'll never tire of saying, the unconscious mind is the seat of everything. It's the seat of everything that comes into your life in reality. Your seeding of ideas, the beginnings of feelings for something, the sense of something going on. That's the beginning of something happening in reality. So imagine you've got this new moon there, a new chapter in this all-powerful area. So the things you're thinking about, especially around that full moon day, something pops into your head and you say, you know what? I think I should be doing this. Or, you know what? That's what's going on there. That's the beginnings of a new chapter for you. I think health is important in this area as well, which is why I always think when we've got a lot of 12th house material, we need to take it a bit easier. Two reasons for that. It's good to recharge your spiritual, mental, physical batteries. That's always a good practice. But I think also if we get more rest and we are more rested, it gives our unconscious mind a good time to housekeep. So a lot of things get sorted and sifted, and into our dreams and our intuitions come all these rich and important ideas. Because remember, Pisces, in 4 weeks' time, 28 days, you'll have a new moon in your sign. So a lot of the things you'll do between this new moon and your own new moon are going to be putting in the building blocks, if you like, of those new things to come. If we go to Virgo, we're in the 6th house. And when I think of that new moon in the 6th house, it's your area of life, if you like, because you're a sign who's strongly kind of service-oriented. You like things to make sense. It doesn't mean you can't be a romantic and a dreamer as well. But the mainstay for a Virgo is, does it work? Is it working? Is it real? You know, that fine analytical mind of yours, but it's also about service. And I think the important thing about a new moon here is the idea of where you can be in service. That means, you know, do you need to look after your next door neighbor or just check on your next door neighbor? Does it mean that you need to think of the small acts that you do on a daily basis as an act of service, as something devotional, as opposed to just being repetitious and boring, like a hamster on a treadmill? The idea of whatever it is you do, being a service and being part of the structure of your life, that has purpose. And so this new moon, I suppose, in a nutshell for you, Virgo, is all about finding purpose and meaning in even the smallest things. And yes, it may mean a new job. It may mean new personnel if you work in a company where you're with people. It may also mean a new place to work, a new office or a new whatever it is. There are all those meanings as well. And yes, a new beginning health-wise for you too. And perhaps a good idea to start some healthy practices if you're not already doing it. I know Virgos are very health conscious, but sometimes a change in tactics is as good as a rest, as they say. So we come to Gemini. The new moon is in the ninth house. Ninth house of far horizons. As an air sign, Gemini, you are a sign that's very adaptable and curious. I mean, you do love to know what's going on everywhere, whether it's what's going on in your small world or whether it's what's going on over in Japan or over in Australia or wherever we are. You're curious about the world. So on the one level, a new moon here says there is a new development here in regard to foreign places, people in foreign places, your connection with an international situation, so that you're looking beyond your own four square walls and your own street and your own town. You're looking at something that's much bigger. It's also one of the seeking houses, that ninth house. And I think seeking to know things, whether that's learning more about your spiritual self, whether it's learning about how, some aspect of higher academia, so to speak, whether it's doing things of the higher mind, that new moon is all about. Let's explore that. And of course, it's in Aquarius. So we see about breaking boundaries and, letting the light bearer in to those bigger horizons. And yes, it might mean a journey or the planning of a big travel extravaganza a little bit later in the year, and things to do with people and companies and places out there in the world. That new moon is going to draw into your experience those kind of things. If we come to Sagittarius, we're now in the third house, which means you have to come down to earth a bit. Now, having said that, it's not really that you have to lose your sense of the bigger picture, but it just means there are things in the smaller picture you need to look at. So this new moon is an opportunity to really look at the things that go to make your bigger dreams. In other words, it's looking at the little things that become the big things. It may also signify some aspect of learning for you. Maybe you'll go back to school, take a course. Maybe you will end up teaching. And I'm just thinking of this again in COVID, how many mothers and fathers ended up having to teach their children, which was a bit of a nightmare. So there are all sorts of aspects of teaching. But, if we think about that, sometimes we have to teach somebody what to do because they're going to replace us in a job, or we have to teach some aspect of what we do to other people. We have to educate others. And of course, social media is a wonderful platform. A YouTube channel is a wonderful means of being able to air our views and educate people. So this new moon has something to do with that. And yes, it may mean there's a lot of travel coming up for you, not necessarily long distance travel, just, travel, movement. I'd rather think of movement. I think movement means things aren't stuck. And remember when we looked at that bundle shaping, and I said, this is a bit like stickiness. So any kind of movement you can get is good. So here we now go with our final group, and we look at Capricorn first of all. Well, it's hard for me to look at new Capricorn without thinking about that whole cluster of Mars, Mercury, Venus, Pluto in your sign. So as we get towards this new moon, and actually even after it, we've got this feeling that there's a lot of things going on in your life that are really moving the furniture. There are a lot of things shifting, moving, and changing. And in the middle of this comes the new moon, and that's in your second house. So we're thinking of things to do with values, valuables, finance, things that give you stability and structure in life. And if we look at this time period, the end of January, that's often a time when many people are filing taxes or doing something to do with tax. And it's also a time when all the bills for Christmas have come in or are still coming in. And so it can be a time when there's a lot going on with finances. So one of the things that I pointed out with this new moon being a conjunct Saturn is the idea that you want a new beginning coming out of a reality is what this is. So maybe in your case, it's a financial reality. If we look at Cancer, then this new moon is in your 8th house, and we're still in the area of finance, but we're more in the realm of financial agreements and financial relationships. So that's tying in things to do with banks and mortgages and lending institutions and partnerships. If you're in business partnerships, financial aspects of that. It's also to do with your own partner, your life partner, if you're in that kind of relationship. So it's a great opportunity to get your finances sorted. Let's face it, we can all get a little lazy at times. We've done things the same way forever. And in fact, we've probably got all sorts of financial things that could be much better handled, and we'd have more money and less worry. More money, less worry. So that's one aspect of this new moon, is the ability to bring in new financial strategies that are going to help to make life much easier for you. And of course, this area isn't just about finance, it's about feelings. So it's also about intimacy. So here, when we look at intimacy, we're thinking about a new moon start. So does this give you an opportunity to kickstart your sex life? Maybe you're listening to me and groaning and saying, oh no, not again. But you know, sex is the glue in a relationship, and it's also the means by which we communicate. I often say it's just like driving a car without any oil in the engine. It's very clunky. And it's the same really if you have no intimacy with a partner and you need to renew that togetherness, that part. And my goodness, what a difference it will make to your overall relationship. We come to our last two now, and let's look at Libra. Libra, this new moon is in the 5th house. This is a very creative area of the horoscope. And you know, sometimes when I talk to my clients and I talk about creativity, they say to me, oh yeah, but I'm not creative. And I think in their minds, being creative is painting a picture or, doing craft work. Whereas really and truly, creativity is when we are involved in an activity or a pursuit that involves our unique self. So we're bringing something of ourselves into the action and our activities. And this is why this 5th house is also an area of procreativity, where we think about babies and pregnancy, because we are bringing something of ourselves into the world. So yes, for some Librans, this is all about a new baby on the way or a new pregnancy. For others, nothing to do with that. It's more to do with a new endeavor, a new enterprise, something that's beginning and you've got your whole heart and soul into it. And it's also an indication that the creative side of life is a great antidote to stress and things that we may, if our life is difficult and we're very bogged down with what's going on in our lives, getting creatively involved in something, even if that's being creative in the kitchen and making a cake, whatever it is, it does do something for our system. It makes us feel positive again. So this new moon in the creative area of your horoscope is a sense of renewal in some way, and the inspiration for joy and for all those other things that bring us pleasure in life. Finally, and last but not least, Aries, that moon in the 11th house. Well, this is going to bring out your charitable spirit. Aries, sometimes called a bit of a Mimi sign because it's the first sign of the zodiac and you're always full of ideas and you want to do things, you're always in charge. And sometimes that becomes a criticism because people feel they don't have a voice when you're around. But with this new moon in the 11th house, this is all about sharing and being part of a team, collaborations. And being part of a team is such a positive thing. I even say this to people I work with who are in a marriage. I say often, get into your team. This is Team Jones or Team Thornton. Work as a team. You're on the same team. Set your goals, go for it. And out of that will come a great sense of unity. But the 11th house is also, if you like, the kind of collective unconscious. So you're a little bit more involved with planetary consciousness, this idea that it's not just about you and not even just about you and your surroundings or you and your family. It's about your place in the rest of the world. And that new moon says things need to be done. We know they need to be done. We know all about what climate change is doing. So Aries, this is your signal to get active in all of this. And I think too, last thing about Aries here, because the 11th house comes after the 10th house, which is about career and my place in the world and what I want to be recognized for. In the 11th house, we've sort of gone beyond that. It's all about what's the meaning of things? What's the meaning of all that? What is the purpose of all that? What is the fulfillment I get from this? So it has a lot to do really with what you choose to do as a fulfilling practice, as something that has an extra quality to it than just, doing it for the job's sake, so to speak. So that's it. That's my take on all 12 signs. And I think generally, as I said, with Aquarius, it is this mixture, because also of the sign itself, ruled by Saturn, ruled by Uranus, but also the new moon sandwiched between Uranus and Saturn. It's almost as like we have to be real. We have to deal with something that's quite difficult in order to find that liberation or that joy that we're all seeking. Now, there's another thing about this new moon, which I really want to end with. And on the 2nd of February, one of the pagan festivals takes place. It's Candlemas. And of course, the first, the second, they're very close together. And this is a light festival, if you like. And we've talked about the light a lot on this video. And one of the things to think about, this idea of this festival of Candlemas and bringing the light into the darkness, is that it is or has been celebrated in honor of Demeter, who went into the underworld with a torch in order to find her daughter Persephone. And we have a wonderful allegory here of having to go into the dark sometimes, because in the dark are all sorts of things we need to understand, to incorporate in our lives. It's a little bit scary, so we take a torch with us so that we can see our way in the dark. And given that these are, to many people, dark times, the idea of bringing a light to bear on those dark times, whether that means the light in our own consciousness or whether it means bringing light into other people's darkness, helping them through your wisdom and your joy to find the light. This all seems to fit together very much with this idea of the new moon in Aquarius. So I'm going to leave you with those light-bearing thoughts, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks' time. Bye for now.